Hey everyone, Panyo here. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of After Dinner Mints. I highly encourage everyone tuning in to join us in the Art Blocks Discord. A link to our Discord can be found in the description of this video. As always, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss an episode of our weekly show. And now, let's introduce our guest for this afternoon. We have generative artist Maya Man.
Hi, everybody. I'm excited
How's it
to be
going,
here.
Maya? How you
Good.
doing?
I'm great.
Well, I'm so happy to have you on After Dinner Mints. We're going to talk about your project, Fake It Till You Make It, just a little bit later on. But, maybe you can kind of kick things off and tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so I'm an artist and I make work that focuses on how we present ourselves on the internet. I actually come from a background in computer science. So I studied computer science in college, and I also have a background in dance. And so I feel like a lot of my life I've been thinking about performance. But after I was studying computer science and I started meeting people who were working with technology and working with code to make artwork, I realized that that was exactly what I wanted to be doing. So now I'm an artist who works primarily with software. Yeah, and I'm excited to talk more about the project because I feel like it represents a lot of my thinking over the past year really well.
Great. And, I'm kind of curious, when you started learning about or getting into, generative art, who were some of those artists that you kind of looked up to and inspired you early on?
Yeah, so I really looked up to Lauren Lee McCarthy, who I actually met after going to the first P5JS conference in 2015. And I was really inspired by the way that she was working with software because she was working with code, but also thinking critically about technology and experimenting with the way that we socialize and the way that we interact with technology in our everyday lives. And really working with it on a conceptual level. And that really, for me, helped push the boundaries of what I thought generative art could be. Yeah, so she was really influential for me early on. And also Casey Reis, who, yeah, I now have the chance to work with both of them. I'm in the MFA program at UCLA in media art. So they were both really big inspirations for me early on.
That's great. And so when you met Lauren McCarthy, who you said was working on P5JS, were you already in coding and kind of like tapping into that creative side?
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely already coding because I was in my first year of I just finished my first year of college studying computer science. But at that point, I didn't really know what was possible with code. I knew I really liked code. I really liked math. I wanted to do something that was logical in that way. Um, and then after meeting Lauren, I that was what for me kind of opened the door to realizing that there people had this expansive view of what art could be in terms of medium. I grew up in like a small suburban town in Pennsylvania, and I, growing up, always thought that artists were people who were really good at drawing and painting, and I was like, that's not for me. I like math. And so, but I was also a dancer growing up, which for me was a really important outlet. Yeah, and so I think meeting her and meeting other artists who were engaging with technology in that critical and creative way was what for me helped me be able to see myself as becoming an artist.
Great. And, obviously we're in this NFT kind of crypto space and, you being in school, like I'm curious to know, when was your introduction into the space and, how, obviously you're an artist on art blocks and kind of just putting this art on the blockchain. I'm curious to know
Mhm.
like what people, your peers or people at school kind of think about all of this.
Yeah, I mean, early on, I remember for me, my first active introduction to NFTs was through the first show on Feral File, which I was part of, called Social Codes, which was curated by Casey Reese. And I that was my first NFT I'd ever made. At that point, I still feel like I was very early in my journey toward understanding all of the possibilities. But that was what got me excited about being part of the space and making work and putting it on the blockchain. And so the more I started to learn, I got excited about a lot of the thinking behind the technology and a lot of the ethos around Web3. But at the same time, it was also a really divisive topic. I mean, for everybody, but especially in the media art community, because it was introducing a market where there hadn't really been one in the media art community before. And I think it was a really big adjustment and something that I personally felt really conflicted about at first. I mean, and still do in a lot of ways, but I felt really cautious about how I involved myself in the space. But I've had really great conversations with other artists and my peers, and I think when I decided to create the project for Art Blocks and launch the project, I felt really good about it, and like it was something I really wanted to do. So
Great.
yeah.
And when you selected that piece for Feral File for that drop last year in 2021, what was the thought process about selecting the piece for that project? Was it immediate, or were you thinking about like, all right, this is my very first piece on the blockchain, or what was that thought process like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a little bit scary to put my first work on the blockchain. There's something that feels very permanent about it, which is I've also talked to artists about, and I think, even though it feels very permanent, there's so much on the blockchain and you can continue to create more work, and the sort of weight of it varies. But I wanted to put something that I felt like represented a little bit of where I'd been in my practice. I'd previously been working a lot with movement and a lot with dance. Like I said, I have a dance background. And so I wanted to kind of push the work that I was doing with computer vision analysis in the browser and movement in the browser a little bit further. And I also wanted it to represent a little bit more of where I wanted to go, where I was thinking about collaging images in the browser and performance. And the reason I made some decisions around it that I did, you move your cursor and my form follows your cursor as you move it around the screen. And I really wanted the piece that I made to showcase what to me was exciting about making work in the browser was that it's interactive, and I had the chance to invite someone viewing it to sort of co-create the piece with me. And so that element was really important to me, which was in contrast to some previous work I had done that was more of a passive experience as a viewer, even if it was generative.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And, kind of talking a little bit about all these early pieces that you created, can we see some of those early pieces? Can you share some with us?
Yeah, for sure. So I think the first one I want to share is one I actually made in 2018 and released in 2019. And this project is called Glance Back. It's a browser extension. And it's funny, when I made it at the time, I wasn't thinking I'm going to make this is a generative piece, but it really is. The way that it works is you install the extension, and then once a day at random, when you open a new tab, it takes a photo of you really fast. You don't really have time to look cute and fix your hair or anything or smile.
Mhm.
And then it asks you what you're thinking about. I'll show you here. So it looks like this when it takes a photo of you, and you type in what you're thinking about in that moment. And then you start to slowly collect this archive of photos of you just staring at your computer. For me, it's usually no expression on my face because I'm not thinking about how I look when I'm on the internet usually. But it's become this really important collection for me of images of times that I'm sharing with my computer every single day. And I spend a lot of time looking at my computer screen. And I now have over 1,000 photos. Yeah, over 3 years of photos taken by this extension. And it's been really fun because I've released it to the public. And it has about 9,000 people using it. And sometimes people will share their photos on social media. I can't see them because all the photos are stored locally, but sometimes they share and tag me. And it's really fun for me to see other people use the extension and collect these moments from their life. So this is definitely still one of my most important pieces because I still use it every day. And so do all of these other people. And it feels like this sort of distributed performance that we're all engaging in together via this piece of software that I wrote. So this project has been really fun and definitely one of my earliest generative projects that I still talk about and use to this day.
Is it
Um,
what's the timeline on that gonna look like for you? Is this something that you'll use indefinitely, or do you have kind of like, an end date, or what does that
Oh,
look like?
definitely no end date. I mean, I'll use it as long as it keeps working. Honestly, I've been meaning to update the software for a really long time. There's some features I would like to add to it, um, to let people more easily create these like reels with it. And because all the photos are stored locally, sometimes I've had people lose photos also. So thinking about, is there a
Yeah.
way to like back them up that feels right for the software? Yeah. So really, my hope for is to continue to develop it and definitely continue to use it. So
Awesome. I love
yeah,
it.
yeah. Um, yeah, and then maybe I'll show one more piece I made recently. So this one is actually from this year, and it's called "Read It and Weep," and it's an infinitely performed text. And it was shown at the Artists Who Code show that was an Artsy and Vellum Los Angeles collaboration. So I got to see it on this huge screen at Vellum, which was really fun. But I'll show you the piece right now in the browser. It's actually running live. So you can visit it at readitandweep.live. But what happens is it's pulling from three different libraries of text. The white text are excerpts from my journals from the past 10 years. So middle school, high school, beyond. And the hot pink text are excerpts from articles, books, and essays that I've read over the past couple of years. Usually the writer is talking about something related to femininity or identity or the internet. And then I hope you can see there's some light pink text here. And all of the light pink text are these kind of Unicode sparkles or like transcribed TikTok sounds or Tumblr quotes that I reblogged when I was in high school. And it kind of layers all of these things together, on and on and on. And the order that it comes in and the placement on screen and the size of the text is all generative. And so each time it runs, it looks different and I find new connections between the different pieces. I kind of wanted it to feel like the inside of my brain a little bit and the experience of being on the internet where it's just like no context, everything coming at you at once. Yeah, so this is another recent piece that interestingly also is text based in the way that Fake It Till You Make It is. Yeah.
I love it. That's super cool. Well, speaking of, kind of text projects, Fake It Till You Make It, love it so much. It's on Art Blocks, curated, got released, just a few months ago. And
Mhm.
yeah, I definitely want to spend time talking about this project. And, maybe you can kind of kick it off with telling us a little bit about the idea behind this project.
Totally, yeah. So I started this project thinking a lot about the Instagram graphics that people post that are text based, that are usually these very sort of bubbly, sugar cookie, feminine colors, and they often have phrases that relate to mental health, self care, or kind of feel like advice about how to live your life. And I started looking at these and becoming really interested in them because of the way that they utilize language in combination with these aesthetics that very much felt like they were kind of in conversation with the direct to consumer brand aesthetics of brands like Glossier or Casper. But rather than selling a product, what these little graphics were um, trying to sell in a way was an idea of how you should live your life or how you should think about yourself. And I became really fascinated by the way that people not only just put them online, but also the way that they operated on a platform like Instagram, where people were expected to like and comment. And then also, often people will repost them as a sort of like affirmation of this is what I think about myself or how I see the world. So I started just collecting hundreds of them, and I made a separate Instagram account, which I'll talk more about later, but is the Fake It Till You Make It account now. And I just would only follow accounts that posted these kinds of graphics and saved hundreds of them. And then I decided I was interested to see if I could create a generative system that would be able to generate graphics that felt like they were in the style of all of these graphics that I had seen online, but also kind of remixed and scrambled the language to lean into the absurdity of how they often felt to me when I read them online. So that's really where the project started. And then I started playing around with a really simple language system that's like a Mad Lib system, essentially. Um, and I pulled all of the language from these actual graphics that I'd collected, totally manually because they're just images. So I would just type in the different phrases and parse the words into different categories that I'd seen. And then I started to just scramble and remix them in the program I was creating. And I was really excited by the how the language turned out because I wanted it to walk this line between sometimes sounding completely normal, like something you might see on Instagram today if you scrolled by, and all the way to it feeling like totally absurd and hilarious. And yeah, I really wanted that element of humor in it too. So I was really excited when I started experimenting and prototyping the language system, and it felt right to me. So that's really how the project started. And to me, the project really is best shown as an explicitly generative project. And so I was really excited about releasing it on a platform like Art Blocks because I felt like it was best able to showcase the system that I had built.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it from beginning to finish as far as the project and seeing all the different outputs. One thing I noticed, I think it was on the description of your project. It says, "Text is wrapped in the sugar cookie aesthetic world of girl power, positive vibes, boss babe kind of media." Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, totally. So the phrase sugar cookie actually came from there's this podcast that I love called Nympha Alumni. Which is amazing. They do a lot of like cultural criticism, talk about fashion and femininity. But they have this episode called Sugar Cookie Consumerism that's actually talking about like mall culture and sort
Mm.
of like Victoria's Secret pink and like early 2010 sort of like hyper feminine aesthetics. And I just loved the way that they used that phrase. And to me, this this project doesn't isn't exactly from that era, but it more is kind of from what I guess I would also call like girl boss era of aesthetics. And it was really interesting to me that these phrases, they're not it's not just about the phrases. Like people aren't just posting white background, black text and just hoping people read it. These are pretty the way that they operate online, they're pretty explicitly marketed in a way where they read as feminine. And I so much of being a young girl online, I think, revolves around wanting to sort of achieve this aspirational lifestyle or identity that you see people putting out on the internet. And to me, the way that these aesthetics were operating in these graphics on Instagram was sort of the like text based extension of like aspirational mood board imagery, because it was kind of saying, like, oh, this is how like you should feel or you should live, and felt very instructional, almost pseudo religious in a way.
Yeah.
And but then they are using these aesthetics as a tool to find the odd like a target audience and really market the graphics in a way that people read them and feel that they're aligned with the sort of intended identity of the audience. Yeah.
Great. And I'm just really curious how the different text is kind of formed, the process for creating the art for each mint. Can you talk to us, how does the program know how to structure the text?
Yeah. So yeah, like I said before, it's like a Mad Lib system almost, which by that I just mean that um I would look at a bunch of graphics, and then if I saw one that said, for example, believe in yourself, I would put believe in my list of verbs, and then I would have verb in yourself as a sentence structure. And then what's happening is that I was doing that parsing with all of the text that I found at scale. So I have about 250 different sentence structures. And so they each have like 1 to 4 sort of blank spaces for another word to go in. And then I have these long lists of nouns, verbs, adjectives that are all from the actual graphics, but they're all being remixed within the system. So what happens is that a few words that might have been in one graphic that made sense there are completely recontextualized when they're put in a different sentence structure. And so that's happening along with some other elements like punctuation is something that there's a chance of being added or not. There's also what I call interjections, which are like some of them will start out saying like, hey girl, or like babe, comma. And so there's also a lot of those that have a chance to be added. But that's essentially how the language system works. But because there are 250 sentence structures and then these long lists of potential words, there's about 80 billion different possibilities, including all of those different elements of what might be generated. Exactly.
That's awesome. And we'll talk a little bit about and see some of your favorite mints, or maybe some of the mints that kind of surprised you.
Mhm.
But I would love to talk just a little bit about the color process, like selecting the color palettes. I know there's an inspiration for that pastel, like sugar cookie aesthetic, and it really does
Mhm.
like catch your eye when you look at these mints. And I'm curious to know, like, is it based on what you saw on Instagram, or tell us a little bit about that?
Totally. This is so fun to talk about because I feel like I usually don't get to talk about this. But the color palettes was actually one of the most challenging pieces for me. The language system was actually probably the thing that came most easily. But the color palettes were really hard because I was looking at all these different accounts, and I first started by just pulling colors from different graphics that I saw and then sort of throwing them all into the program. And it just totally wasn't working as individual mints, but also as a collection. I just felt like there wasn't this coherence in the way that it looked. And also, working with text was also particularly difficult because I think text is not very forgiving in terms of the way that you use color or the way that you even position a layout because we have certain expectations and certain abilities in terms of how we're able to read something. So if the text color is too close to the background or doesn't look good isn't really legible with a certain background, it totally wouldn't work. So I think I initially wanted to be able to just kind of like cherry pick a bunch of colors, throw them in together, and then, have it look great. And then that's not what happened at all. And so I went through a lot of iterations of working with the colors and eventually just kind of dove into some light color theory and made my own color palette that was obviously inspired by all of these graphics, but I really built it from scratch, starting with a few central colors and then building out the edges of that, and then defining really specific color palettes that would go together. So you see, like all of the gradients are like predefined sets. All of the patterns are predefined sets. Whereas at the beginning, I thought I might do a little more mixing um, and leave it up to the randomness. But I ended up having for each one to really engineer it. And I think that to me got it to the place that I wanted to be in terms of how it looked as a collection.
Awesome. And I would love to just hear a little bit more about talking through these different features that you have for all of the mints.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a couple of different things, but yeah, maybe you want to go ahead and just talk through a couple of these features.
Yeah, for sure. So I also had a lot of fun naming the features, which was kind of the last thing that I did. So I named all the color palettes and all of the layouts. I initially started with the most basic visuals, which is like the large chunk of text in the center and then like a solid or gradient background. And then as I was building the collection and looking at actual Instagram accounts, there just wasn't enough variation. And I got really great feedback from the art blocks team too, that was pushing me to have more variation. And so that's when I decided to start thinking about other layouts that people use in the graphics beyond just a central text layout. So that's where you see the elements start to come in. That's like TMI text, which is the name of one of the categories, which is the one that has just all of these instructions in a huge block. And I wanted that one to feel like so overwhelming and absurd in the way that it's telling you that you should do all of these different things. And so it's sometimes contradictory. There's also the one that I believe I call Snack Tray, which is the 9 elements with just like a sentence or a word underneath. And those really helped visually vary how the collection looked as a set, but I think also helped me sort of push the boundaries of what these kinds of graphics look like on Instagram, because they're all pulled from um, they're all referencing something I'd actually seen before, but have a bit of a different twist to the ones that are just more one large chunk of text. And then I also really wanted to play around with motion a little bit, which is something that I just feel when I'm programming, and something that's great about being able to make code-based work is to have the ability to have something running live in the browser. And even though that wasn't necessarily something that is referenceable to the initial concept of the graphic, usually they're not motion based. I had a lot of fun thinking about how to add a little bit of motion or a little bit of something extra to something that was a still image, in that would usually be a still image on Instagram. And so I was playing around with some of the gradients have motion. There's some of the more rare hypnotic heartthrob ones where the heart continues to extend. So I really enjoyed doing that. And then another feature is the sparkles, which are sometimes added around the text. And that one was, yeah, definitely a little bit challenging for me also, because I initially thought, oh, I'll just have sparkles placed at this position or this like random location. And you think about when these people are designing a graphic to go with sparkles around the text, each sparkle is individually placed in relation to the text, so it looks nice. And so it was definitely a challenge for me to then think about how to calculate where the text is and place the sparkles differently on each graphic, depending on what string was generated. Yeah, and so I think early on I started with a prototype that was just, you know, the language and then different backgrounds, and I was really glad that I was challenged to push the variation even further with the different features.
I love that. And then also, there's also a feature where it kind of, or you have a couple special symbols, it's a heart, flower,
Mhm.
star. And I'm curious to know, like, what influenced you to use those? Was it still based on kind of what you were seeing on the internet, on Instagram, or how did you land on those 3 different symbols?
Yeah, definitely. They were definitely based on what I was seeing kind of constantly recurring across different Instagram accounts as symbols. And to me, they really read as like even just in terms of shape, they just read as an immediate reference to this kind of like feminine aesthetic online. And so I really liked how they kind of provided like a visual through line for the collection, and then also felt like definitely referenceable to the ways that like girls communicate or
Yeah.
use aesthetics online.
I love it. It's great. And what's the preferred way for collectors to kind of display and enjoy the art? Would you say that, are you going to be offering prints down the line, down the road, or would you
Yeah.
prefer digitally, or let's talk a little
Yeah,
bit about both?
I definitely want to offer prints in the future. I'm also actually starting to work on putting them together, putting all of the mints together in a book, hopefully for
Oh,
next
wow.
year.
I love it.
And so that's another way that I'm excited to have them displayed. But to me, the piece is really the sort of output of the code, and I feel I I'm hoping to offer nice prints for collectors in the future, but I also feel excited about seeing the mints on stickers or, you know, on a piece of clothing, or just kind of they don't feel to me like precious art objects. They, because of the way that they operate online, to me they're meant to sort of be shared and repurposed. And I have one as my phone screen background, and I post them on Instagram also, and to me that's as much of the work as it is if it's, you know, on a beautiful screen in a gallery. And so I like to see them sort of taken out of context. And even like we were talking about before, seeing people use them in block talk and kind of use them
Mhm.
in conversation. One of the best parts of the project has been seeing how people kind of use them and share them in an unexpected way.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. Even before the drop, you were in Block Talk, which for people that are listening, it's our most popular channel on our Discord. And you were sharing some of those test mints, and people were just using them in general conversations. People were having conversations about whatever's going on in the space, and they would just drop one of the testaments, and it would fit like the conversation perfectly. And I'd love for you to kind of just tell us, like, I'm curious to know like what your thoughts were, kind of having that interaction with the community.
Yeah, I mean, I really loved having Block Talk, and access to it before and after the drop because, I mean, also as an artist, sometimes you have a show and then you have an opening and then like people come and they're like, "It's so great." And like in a really nice way, but like you kind of it's like hard to sometimes go too deep about the work in that kind of environment. And so this experience of having this what I really found to be like a really rigorous and deep conversation about the work and about art and the relationship between art and the artist, having that happen in Block Talk, kind of surrounding the drop, was really amazing for me. And totally was for me like what I dream in terms of having people engage with the work. It's important to me that it sparks some kind of critical dialogue and that people are really thinking about it and maybe arguing about it and talking about it in a way that is thoughtful. So I really loved that aspect of it. Um, I mean, it also at many times was definitely like it's intense to think, okay, now there's all these people who can talk about what they think about your project. But it was really fun to see people then start to pull from actual mints and use them in conversation because to me, this project also is really referencing meme culture in a big way. And that's how I see lots of people use memes. They kind of pull them in online when they fit the conversation. And it was something that I didn't really think about doing the project. I think because of the function in Discord where you can call up a specific mint by calling in that number and then have it in line in the conversation, that really opened the door for there to be that kind of use of it, which I think is just so amazing and something that, yeah, I hadn't even thought about before, but became one of my favorite parts of launching the project.
Yeah, I was talking to Maya earlier before we started recording, and even today, like people they're using that call function in Block Talk to pull up some of those mints to rally behind some of these conversations that are happening. And I think it's perfect. It's very relatable. You're talking about kind of like the meme culture, and there's so many people in our community and collectors that embrace and love the meme culture, and kind of just that it just adds a lot to the conversation, and it's a part of the space. So I would love now, if you don't mind, just talking a little about and sharing some of those favorite or surprising mints that kind of came through the
Yeah.
winter.
Here, let me pull up. Um, oh yeah. So I actually, if anyone's interested in looking at this, I actually went through the entire 700 edition collection. And then I put all of my favorites in this Arena channel, which Arena is a platform that I use a lot as a part of my arts practice. But you can collect images, links, and organize them into what are called channels, if you haven't used it before. But anyway, I put all of my favorites in here, but after I put all of my favorites in, there were still like over 100 of them, and I was like, oh, I really didn't cut it down very much. But I'll share. Here's all of them, but a few of the ones that I really love. This one is one I really like. It says, "Actually, life is fearless, and I do have moments." For some reason, all like the when it says "actually," I just love that as an introduction to the phrase because it kind of implies some sort of like contradiction to something that they or someone like something someone was previously saying. So yeah, this one always grounds me a little bit. Also, I should say I started the project, maybe this came through a little bit, but I started the project feeling kind of cynical a little bit about what these graphics do online and the way that they operate. And honestly, though, because I've looked at thousands of these making the project over the past year, I became way less cynical about them because sometimes the program turns out stuff that I'm like, that's really deep. So,
Yeah.
um, also like this one, in the mood to be meaningful. This one kind of to me, yeah, represents a core feeling of the project. And I think both of these have this subtle heart gradient in the background that I really like too. Um, and so does this one, scare the people that follow you, which I probably do every day. I also really love this one. Psycho girls are near. Um,
That's awesome.
And I really like this one too. Ego is a liar. I think the ones that, yeah, the ones that have ego in them, I really love too because there's something that, yeah, I feel like is kind of embedded into a platform like Instagram, but is less exposed in this way all the time. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
Mhm.
I'm curious actually, I didn't ask this earlier, but how did you land on the font? Like the style of the font to
Um,
kind of use?
yeah.
Was that easy or did that kind of come pretty naturally?
Yeah. Well, it's actually, yeah, it's interesting to talk about because I would have done this project really differently. I mean, not completely differently, but it visually would be pretty different. I think if I had made it into a website, that like a
Mhm.
generative website piece that I just put on the internet and I'm like, here it is. But a big constraint of the projects that are on art blocks, which is amazing because that all because on art blocks all of the code is on chain. And so as an artist, you're really thinking about how to work within that constraint. And so that means like you're really not going to use images or be like pulling in these heavy assets. And so in terms of font, um, it really didn't make sense for me to use any kind of font file on chain. And so I was really debating about how to work with font and type in a way that made sense. At first, I started thinking maybe I should go the route of having different typefaces, but I ultimately decided on using what's the default sans serif. And I added a little bit of like extra padding on each letter. And so to make it feel a little bit different than the default, so it has a little bit of something extra. But that ended up being the what made the most sense to work with on chain. And actually, visually, I really like that it has this very uniform um, look to it, and then also allows sort of the surrounding aesthetics to do a lot of the lifting in terms of getting it to that aesthetic place that I wanted it to be in. Yeah, but it was definitely, I thought a lot about the type before and tried out some of the other different typefaces and considered like custom creating a font that is drawn on canvas for each
Mhm.
letter, but this ultimately ended up making the most sense. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. That's great. I appreciate you sharing that. And I'm curious to know because, as artists, some artists will kind of build off of previous projects as they kind of, work on their career. But I'm curious, are you going to build off of Fake It Till You Make It for future projects? Or is this kind of like, kind of where you're going to stop with this kind of style and then you'll kind of explore something else?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of my recent work feels very aligned with Fake It Till You Make It. A lot of what I've been doing, is my screen shared right now, so?
Yeah, yeah, it is.
Okay, maybe I'll just show, so this was the poster for the solo show I had last year at UCLA that also ended up then traveling to Tokyo over the summer to be shown at Soot Gallery there. But yeah, I was playing around a lot with these aesthetics in my work already. You can see this piece. I use this pink punching bag. And
Mhm.
so and the what I've been thinking about a lot, definitely is in the world of fake it till you make it. I feel excited to develop this book project and continue to think about what I can make in terms of prints for collectors and continue to show this piece. But I'm imagining pursuing the same uh, conceptual line of thinking, but not, I mean, nothing identical to this project, obviously. But what was interesting about making this also is I didn't approach the project or any of my recent work thinking initially, I want to be an artist who works with text explicitly. But it's something that ended up coming pretty naturally given the way that I want a project to feel. I think I'm able to play a lot, like in this poster, for example, also play a lot with language and humor in a way that I feel invites people to engage with the work in a way that I want them to. Um, yeah, and so I think I'll definitely continue this style a little bit, but yeah, I'm excited to try some new things too this coming year.
Awesome. And we were talking a little bit earlier before we started recording. Also, you had an exhibit. Was that right last week at
Yeah,
UCLA?
yeah. So I had my fall MFA preview show at UCLA, which was really fun. It was my whole cohort of, I'm in my second year and last year. And that was really great. I showed a fake it till you make it as a projection on Canvas, which was really fun. And I have the code running live. And then I also showed the punching bag piece, which is titled Love Hate, Read It and Weep, which I showed earlier. And then I actually showed two new generative web based, like browser based pieces, which hopefully I should be releasing in the next few months or so. So yeah, it was really great. I think it's fun for me as an artist who works natively online and comes from a background in software to now be challenged to think about how do I translate this work that for me, like I was saying before, the work is the code. The work is the same work if you're looking at it on your computer, if you're looking on the gallery, if you're looking at it, yeah, like printed as a sticker. And but it's a fun challenge for me to think about how to translate these digital works to the gallery in a way that still maintains the feeling I want people to have when viewing them. So, yeah.
Absolutely. That's great. And yeah, do you think you'll have any, or do you have any intentions or plans for Fake It Till You'll Make It to do an exhibit? I know you mentioned the book and kind of offering prints. Is that something that you want to explore or?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I'm hoping to potentially do a show that would feature Fake It Till You Make It in LA in like early 2023-ish. But I'm still ironing out the details. But yes,
Cool.
if you're in LA, hopefully that will be happening.
Yeah, you'll have to share it with everyone. I'm sure a lot of people, collectors, would be definitely interested in checking that out.
Yeah,
And
yeah, I'd love to meet people in person.
and is there a website? Do you want to mention the website for people to kind of learn a little bit more about the project?
Yeah, so the URL for the website is fakeittillyoumakeit.lol. And there there's whoops. I had fun making this look like an Instagram account. But there's writing I have about the project. Yeah, some details about the language and the aesthetics. And then you can learn more. And there's also just some references of writing or videos that were important references for the project that you can learn more about my thinking behind it. And then this also links to the Art Blocks project as well as the Instagram account I have where I'm slowly working my way through posting the collection on the account. So, yeah.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And I appreciate you just talking about your project, Fake It Till You Make It. And as I said, I always look forward and just love when I'm in Block Talk or just any of the other channels, and I see some of your mints being shared because it's relevant to the conversations that are going on. So such a cool project, and I really appreciate you talking to us about that today.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was really fun to have the chance to share more about it, because I think, yeah, there's so many details for all of the artist project on art blocks that go into thinking about it, that working up to the release that I think, yeah, often you don't get to talk about. So it's really
Yeah,
nice.
absolutely. Well, are there any techniques or, for your toolbox that, you're hoping to learn for future projects, or, anything that's kind of that you've learned maybe over the past couple of years being in the space that you want to explore?
Yeah, definitely. I think actually I'm this year really challenging myself to think about how to translate a lot of the work that I do to physical space, which is I know counterintuitive maybe, but like I was saying before, I've done a bit of installation work, and thinking about how to make browser-based work into more of an installation or sculptural object in the gallery. And so that's something I've been thinking about a lot, along with making this book. Yeah, and so thinking about how I can kind of move between digital and physical space is something that yeah, I'm hoping to think more about this year.
Cool. And mental health is so important. I feel like it kind of comes out in some of the pieces in your project, Fake It Till You'll Make It. And I'm curious to know from your perspective, how do you wind down once a project is fully minted, or maybe even during the process of coding a project?
That is a good question. I think I there's this when I was working on this project, I had a sense the whole time I was working on it that it needed to be released like yesterday, which I worked on it for like a year because I continually felt like it wasn't quite ready, which was mentally really challenging for me. And I felt super anxious, like now's the time, it has to be released now. Which I often feel about other projects sometimes too, and now kind of looking back, I mean, I really worked on this project for a full year before releasing it, and other people have told me too who I hadn't talked to while making it, the last iteration of this project before I released it was for sure the best iteration of it, and I think while I was working on it, it was really hard for me to shake that feeling of, oh, it needs to be released right now, because when I'm on the internet, you only see people doing stuff, and so I feel like I'm moving slowly or moving too slow. Yeah, so I think for me, it's been a lesson in realizing it's really worth it to move slowly and take the time to make it what I want to make it versus like rush and put something out that I don't feel as proud of. Because I mean, there are moments where I've put things out that now I look back and I wish I'd done something differently, which I mean always happens, but I think I feel really glad that I took the time that I did. Yeah, so I
Yeah,
think not feeling
I
the
feel like
rush.
it's got to be. I feel like that's got to be tough for artists. Kind of figuring out like, all right, when is this project complete? Especially for something where it's long form, generative art, where you don't know the output, and there could be something that gets minted, and you're just like I really wish that wasn't a part of the project. But I think that's got to. Whenever I talk to artists, I feel like that's you just basically have to be like, you know what, I'm done. Like it looks good. I feel happy like with where it's at, and is that how you feel like when you kind of release the project then, or what was that like?
Yeah, definitely. I think I had worked on it so long, so I felt it's really this kind of long form generative process is really an act of trust, I feel like, between me and the
Yeah.
program I wrote. And so I worked on it for so long because sometimes I'd be like, "Oh, like 80% of these look good." But then I'd be like, "But 20% I don't like." And so getting it to the place where I feel like, like here and there are things that, maybe on one I'd be like, "Oh, I wish this was different." But overall, I feel like, yeah, on the project, I got the program to a place where I felt like I trusted it. I mean, it was still really scary on the day of the release, but where I felt like I trusted it enough that whatever 700 mints came out that day, I felt like, okay, I think I know how I'm gonna feel about it, which was really nice. But also, I think there should be some room for you to feel, because with this kind of long form generative project, it is like an exercise in like releasing control and agency.
Mhm.
And I think there also should be room for you to um, not feel like everything has to be completely perfect because it is. this sort of like you, but then you via the system who's making the
Mhm.
project. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
how can people reach you should they have any questions? I know you mentioned the website for Fake It Till You'll Make It. I'll include the
Yeah.
link inside of the show notes. But yeah, any social media plugs or other websites?
Yeah, I mean, my website's mayaontheinter.net. My Instagram handle's Maya on the internet. My website has links to my arena, my Twitter, and everything. Yeah, so you can find me there.
Awesome. Well, Maya, I really, really appreciate you being on After Dinner Minutes. It's been such a great conversation to learn about your background, but then also talking about your latest project on Art Blocks, Fake It Till You Make It. So thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a couple news and notes for people. After Dinner Minutes discussions are available as a podcast. Those will be available on Spotify, Apple, Google, and Amazon. Finally, we have a weekly newsletter that gets delivered once a week with information on upcoming drops and generative art related news. You can find a link to the newsletter in the description of this YouTube video. Thank you again to Maya Man for joining me on After Dinner Minutes. Really, really appreciate you being here today.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Absolutely. And for everyone that's tuning in, make sure you comment, like, and subscribe to the Art Blocks YouTube channel. Be kind to each other, buy what you love, and we will see you all next week. Thanks so much, Maya. I appreciate it.
Bye.